I just tapped the damn thing so hard I stopped the video. So now we have, just like our mainstream media gets fed these talking points. There was corruption in Ukraine. So now every single, you listen to every single broadcaster, any news anchor, and they just spew it out as if it's just a fait accompli. Oh yeah, we wanted to deal with corruption in Ukraine. Well, what exactly was the corruption? You had private companies, people wanting to make money, trying to affect their agenda through the political process. And here, now, so when it happens in another country, we call that corruption. But when it happens day in and day out, and year in and year out, and decade in and decade out, and for centuries in the United States, when the moneyed class wants to buy their politicians, so the politicians do their bidding at the expense of the people who aren't wealthy. Well, we just call that the American way. But when it happens over there, it's called corruption. In China, we talk about, the corruption in China, companies, wanting to gain advantage over each other, over their individual companies. But when it happens in the United States, that's not called corruption. It's called competition. And all the Chinese companies that they're doing with the United States, they're just competing with us. Just like we compete with other companies here in the United States, Chinese companies also compete. And then they compete with us. And now they're getting better than us. For generations, you just go back and study Chinese history. It's a long, beautiful, complex history. And it's mainly a history of China being pretty insular and not really going out into the outside world much and being plundered by outside countries. Britain, the UK, and the United States among them. And now China finally has industrialized to the point where they're on equal footing. And why should they play by the rules that the rest of us made up, that for most of their history, those rules were used to screw China over and to plunder China and to take everything we possibly could out of China at the lowest possible prices? Well, China doesn't owe the rest of the world a thing. And why don't we just understand that Chinese people are just like American people, except they live in China? And they're not our adversaries. We're all in this together. Just like the competition in your workplace. When when you're at work, you objectify the competition. Oh, Microsoft, people who work for Microsoft, when I think of Google, they think of the competition. The people over at Google, what are they up to? They're scheming people over at Google. And the people at Google, think about Microsoft. Oh yeah, the scheming people over at Microsoft. And there's this ridiculous dynamic that gets set up. And how did we get ourselves into this? Because there are people who used to work for Google and then they go to Microsoft and they say, oh, okay, these people over at Microsoft are just like the people over at Google. And it turns out that we're all basically the same. We have different languages in some cases, but we're the same. We're all people. We all want the same thing. So why don't we just all agree that we all want the same thing and work together? And why don't we start looking at the people who are so greedy that they want more and more and more and more. And it turns out that those people are the ones who run the major media companies in the United States. Big, huge, wealthy conglomerate or individual super wealthy people. So they control the narrative. And their narrative is, hey, you poor people, you got to keep working hard. And because China's your adversary, Chinese people are going to come take your stuff. Or the Russians, they're going to come take your stuff. And really what that is rich people, greedy rich people, are afraid that they might lose some of their stuff. Because greedy rich people have this obsession with stuff and more stuff. And they're afraid they might lose it. So then the entire society gets caught up in this nonsense where everyone else is competition. And so now we have an agenda of fear-based, greedy, fear-based agenda in America and elsewhere that is the basis for our whole economy. And it's 99.999%, you just do the math, is for the benefit of the super wealthy. Why is everyone else working for the super wealthy? I think it's time the super wealthy started working for the world. We need to get to a situation where that you get the more you have, the more embarrassed you should be for being gluttonous, you gluttonous pig. And there are people out here in the world, poor people who have nothing. There are people who live in this riverbed, homeless people, good, decent people. I interact with them all the time. Most of them just had a couple of bad things happen in a row. Bad luck, and then boom, they're homeless. Once you're homeless, it's really hard to become unhomeless. And we allow this situation to go on in this country where we have super wealthy people who could solve the homeless problem overnight in America, but they won't, because they want to be super, super wealthy, as if that's a good thing. Why don't we make that a bad thing? People should be embarrassed about being gluttonous. Until everyone has the basic necessities of life, a home. Is it so much to ask that everyone has a roof over their heads? Is that really a lot to ask in 2019 in America? Or when you go to the hospital, or you go to the doctor, is it insane that people are afraid to go to the doctor because of how much it's going to cost? As if basic medical care, basic decency, caring for other people is expensive. It's not expensive. It's only expensive because of the system we have set up, where you've got all these middlemen, and you've got this essentially a tacit collusion between the providers of medical care and the insurance companies. And the insurance companies keep saying costs are going up. Wink, wink to the hospitals. And the hospitals say, yeah, costs are going up. Wink, wink, back to the insurance company. And the insurance company and the hospitals say, hey, costs are going up. So then we individuals have to pay more for insurance. But there's no value being generated by all the increases that we've made in payments to our medical system. There's no return on investment. People aren't getting healthier. In fact, the overall health of America, you look at the big picture, we're getting less and less healthy. So the system that we have set up that takes more and more and more of our resources, now that the baby boomers are getting to an age where they might need a little more medical care, it's going to bust the whole system. And it's a collusive situation. Doctors and hospitals and healthcare providers wink at the insurance company. Hey, you know what? It's the annual 10%, 15% increase in costs every year, as if there's more inflation in the provision of medical care than there is in the rest of the economy. Well, why would that be? Well, it wouldn't be. It only happens because you've got collusion going on, tacit collusion. There's a better future, people. You just need to change our minds. You just have to change your minds. Stop seeing people as adversaries. See them as collaborators. We want to work together into the future. Got an audience here. See you guys later.